this is part 2 of my coming out story. If you haven't seen part 1, you can click on the link right up here and it will take you to that first, and then you can come back to part 2 and watch the rest of my story here. So as you can imagine, I received quite a bit of negative fallout from this whole revelation. I went from being one version of Troy one day to somebody that was the most vile person that you could be the next. I mean, just instantaneous. I've lost so many friends and family members over it. I also received some very bad phone calls from her family. And keep in mind that this is a Baptist pastor's family who used some vulgar language to describe, me as a gay person, as well as some swear words, a few choice words to get their point across to me. One minute you're family or friends, and the next minute you're swearing at me as if I'm some criminal, I also remember getting a call from one of my sister-in-laws who said, well, Troy, when the kids got here, we had to have a good touch, bad touch talk with your children. I said, I'm gay. I'm not a child molester or a child predator. I really just love the fact that, people think they know better than the person that's experiencing it. Who better? I mean, we've lived with this for our entire lives. For me, for 38 years of my life, I had to grapple with this on my own. You would think I have a little bit of understanding of what it's like and, what it feels like to go through being in the closet. I did call my mom. Of course, I was forced into doing that because I told you the anniversary celebration was coming up for my parents. And I had no other way because I was going to show up without her or the kids. So I had to call and tell her. And of course, this was right after they left. And I was at rock bottom, beside myself. I mean, imagine having your children ripped away from you in a way such as this. Even now, it still rips my heart out to even think about it. So of course my mom was in shock, as well as my entire family. But I was very thankful that she came right over, 4-hour trip over to my little apartment that I was staying in with my younger brother, just to try to comfort me, in this kind of a chaotic time in my life. And I was glad she stuck by me. I know a lot of people don't have that luxury. Their parents will turn their backs on them and just forsake them. It's just a horrific thing that you could do to your family, to your kids, or to your siblings, or your friends. Why would you do that? I don't understand it. You can believe what you want. You can have differing opinions if you want. But to totally just toss someone out like yesterday's garbage, nah. And there's no Christian part about that, not at all. I mean, unconditional love, where is that? So my wife filed for legal separation or divorce, whatever you want to call it, in Wisconsin, actually, which you're not allowed to do, but she did it anyway. And then right like a day after that, I filed in Indiana. From then on, it was just one nasty court appearance after another. I didn't get to see my children for the first time after they left in that September until I believe it was in November. I had planned to go to church with them at my father-in-law's church, and it was agreed that I could do that, and we'd all sit together and go to church. But the night before, I happened to try to call my wife and just kind of make sure everything was still set for the next day. But her father got on the phone and said that she was in bed. He said, Troy, I hear you're coming to service tomorrow. And I said, yeah, I plan to with the kids. He said, well, when you walk in the door, I'm going to put men at arm's length around you the entire time you're in the church building. And if you make one false move, I'm going to call the police. I was like, what? I had no idea where he was coming from. Again, fear. But I was like, I told him, I said, I would never disrespect a church service like that. You know, I was just flabbergasted that he would even consider the fact that I would disrupt a service. Well, the next day I showed up to go to church with the kids and they didn't. So I even went to their house and knocked on the door. Nobody came to the door. So they bailed on me after all of that. Of course, we were attending a church here in Anderson, Indiana. I knew what I had experienced and seen happen to other people that came out in other churches, especially my father-in-law's church. So I wrote a letter of resignation is like almost immediately after I told my wife. And I sent that to the church explaining that because of some circumstances, I was withdrawing my membership and, you know, I wasn't going to go into any details here, and I'm sure that she would enlighten you later, but that I could no longer be a member there. And I mean, because I just knew what was coming up, you know, eventually. And that would be what we consider in our Baptist circles, church discipline. And in short, what that entails is you going before the whole church, standing up before the congregation, having them describe your sins or your offense in front of everybody, and kind of have you apologize for that and kind of get right with the church people. So that was my way to just resign, walk away, and let it be. I'd say maybe 2 or 3 months after that, they sent a couple men by my house, and it happened to be one weekend that my kids were visiting with me, because I had been taking the kids just for normalcy for them to church when they would come to visit me. So these men said, "We do not want you to come through the doors of our church again." And I was like, well, I bring my kids, you know, when they're here, and I explained that whole thing to them. And they said, it doesn't matter. And I said, well, what if I do show up? They said, well, we've sought legal counsel, and if you do show up, we will physically pick you up and drag you out in front of your children. And I know you don't want that to happen. Again, these are people that I ministered alongside of, telling me that they've sought legal counsel and they're going to drag me out of a church building. I was devastated. I'd never heard anything like that before. And again, I believe it all goes back to fear, really. So over the next 5 years, I would say it was the darkest part of my life. Part of that has hearing and my children be brainwashed against me in so many different ways, to the point that they were scared to come visit me. Her parents and her were poisoning my own children against me. I do find it amazing. I've worked for a Fortune 500 company for the last 15 years, which I was working there at the time when all of this happened. And it's amazing that a secular company actually looks at a diverse group of people out there in the world and demands respect of their employees for everybody out there, no matter who they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what path they may follow in their life. And yet, all the churches that I've ever been in, they talk like loving everybody, but they don't really. And I find that just fascinating and really saddening that I learned more about diversity at my secular job than I ever did in any Sunday school class or church service. And that's the honest truth. I believe you can disagree with somebody, but you can also still maintain respect and human decency in doing so. So, lessons learned. We talk about lessons learned in my job after a project is done. Despite all of the hurtful things that her family has done to me on purpose, I can still find sympathy and have empathy for her in what she must have experienced at that moment I came out to her. You know, Here I made the decision to marry her, and I should have never done that. I feel bad and horrible about wasting 17 years of her life when she could have been with somebody that could love her 100% emotionally, physically, spiritually, and everything. But because of society and the way I was brought up, there was no other avenue for me to go that I could see, without being torn to shreds somehow. I will say that I did apologize to my wife for stepping out of the marriage. A lot of people might think that's no big deal, but it is a big deal. And there's other ways that I could have gone about it. I could have just come out even before stepping outside my marriage, and for that I did apologize and know that it was not right of me to do that. But I will say that the things that her parents have done and have aided her to do, they are the biggest hypocrites of Christian people that I think I've known in my entire life. A lot of people might say, well, just, move on. And I have moved on. The time that they decided to take everything in my house, throw it in a U-Haul while I was at work, and rip my kids away from me is something that I will never forget. In my opinion, they were given a big test. It wasn't like I sat back and said, okay, let's test them and see how they respond. But they were given a test in my coming out in their family, and they absolutely failed miserably. I hear a lot of talk about hate, towards the LGBT community. And I believe there is some of that out there, but I think more so than hate is fear. At least from where I've come from, everybody that I've seen has been motivated by fear. They look at you all of a sudden as more than a criminal. You can't be trusted. You're a pervert. You're to be shunned and not have any communication with. And it's all based on fear. And it's just like with any other type of individual, whether it be race, other religions, if you're not familiar with them, it's all based on fear. Racism, I think it's based on fear. Yes, there's hate out there in the world, but I think the more dangerous thing is the fear of people that are not like you. That's what makes you respond the way you do to people. Even with my husband Gilbert, he's Latino, and we've heard a lot of things in the news lately towards Latino people that's caused fear. And so you see these outbursts across the country, towards people in restaurants or out shopping, and it's all based on fear. It's not necessarily hate. So if I had to do it all over again, I think I would tell myself, first of all, don't marry a woman. If you're in this situation, my recommendation to you, if you're still single and you're having these feelings, you're gay, don't put other people in a position where you could hurt them later. It's not going to alleviate these feelings that you may have. I would have come out earlier if I felt it was safe enough to do so. And I would tell my younger self to do that. Now, of course, everybody has their own timeline. I don't think you should ever out somebody, but I definitely would come out, because the sooner you can get past that initial shock to your friends and your family, the quicker you can get to a place where you are living a very happy and fulfilled life, in where you're at. And although, you may go through a tough time coming out, I know it's a cliche, the phrase of it gets better, but it really does. It did for me through the darkest times. It was a few years of that, but then I did come through it. And I'm so glad now, looking back, that I did come out. So if you are a spouse or an ex-spouse of someone that's come out, I have maybe some things that might help you go through this process as well. Some things that I wish my ex-wife would have been able to do after I came out. If I could go back, I would urge my ex-wife, work together with your ex-spouse for the sake of the kids. At least be unified for their sake. Because the more contentious your divorce or separation is, the more it's going to hurt them. Also, do not fill your children's head full of crap about the other person. That just hurts the kids, honestly. That's their dad, that's their mom, and, talking negatively about them only hurts the children. Also, try to put yourself, if you can, in your gay ex-spouse's shoes. Have some empathy for what they must have gone through. You don't see the years of inward turmoil living by yourself, trying to cope with this feeling that you really don't want. Have some empathy of where they've come from and what courage actually it took for them to come out to you and be honest with who they are so that they could live their authentic self. And more often than not, they did love you. They just were not able to give you 100% of what they could offer somebody just because they're wired differently. For me, there was just that lack of that emotional connection, that you can't give the opposite sex relationship. I've heard so many stories of positive outcomes of people that had a gay spouse come out, and they ended up being like best friends and able to work together with their kids. And I'm like, wow, what an encouragement that would be, especially for the kids. I mean, what a healthy relationship in front of those kids while they were growing up during those early years in their life. Also, it's very important to understand that it has nothing to do with you. It's not that you're not attractive. It's not that you're not fun, or anything like that, or you can't cook or clean or anything like that. It has nothing to do with anything like that. It's, again, how your spouse was wired. And when that connection is not there and he's attracted to the same sex, that's just how it goes. And it's also very unfair to you when they cannot provide you 100% of themselves. It's just not fair. You deserve somebody that can truly be your best friend, your best advocate, somebody that you can love 100% of your entire being. So going forward, in 2009, I met Gilbert. From that point on, I could say life definitely did get better. Finally, everything seemed to click just like I had ever imagined it would, if I found the right person. So we dated from 2009 until we were married in 2011. We traveled to Dubuque, Iowa to get married. That was before it was legally recognized across the nation. Currently, my twin brother that I mentioned before, that's the pastor, has nothing to do with us. Especially after we decided to get married, he feels like if he is in our company or sits down to eat with us or, hangs out with us in any way, that he is condoning our lifestyle, our marriage. So it's really sad. It's a shame, especially coming from a pastor like that and your twin brother. We were very close growing up. So that's the line they've drawn, and you have to determine to cut out negative people in your life because they only seek to drag you down. So I'm perfectly fine with that decision if that's the way they want to be. My parents and two younger siblings, even though they don't agree with us, they were able to, I like to use the word, tolerate us being around. And that took a little doing at first with Gilbert coming around. But especially my mother, she reached out to him, would give him hugs when he would come, made him feel welcome in the house. So yeah, that pretty much sums up my coming out story. Today, I am so happy I had the courage to come out and be my authentic self. That was a lot to share. There's a lot more of my story that I could have shared. I love hearing coming out stories from other people because they're always so encouraging to me. And I hope somehow this was an encouragement to you, in that even though you might go through a rough coming out period, it will get better, you know, and just keep pressing forward, leaning on those friends. Please consider subscribing to our channel, Bonded Together, and hit that bell notification if you want to get notified when we upload new video content. Also, check out some of the other videos that we've already made. Some of them are kind of crazy at this point, but we'd love to have you stick around with us and get to know us a little bit better. Gilbert's going to be making his coming out story separately, so as soon as I can nail him down to do that, his work schedule is crazy, but we hope to get his story out there so that you could hear from him as well, his experience of coming out. Thanks for watching.